Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into the latest sports science today to see exactly how your choice of barbell changes the mechanics of your lift. If you spend any time at all in the squat rack, you already know that optimizing your leg day is kind of part art, part science. So, we're going to unpack a brand new study from the International Journal of Exercise Science that looks at a very specific gym showdown, the traditional Olympic barbell versus the safety squat bar. Okay, let's get into it. We all know the standard straight Olympic bar, right? It's the absolute gold standard. And in this study, the lifters were using a low bar placement. But then we have the safety squat bar, or the SSB. It looks radically different. It's got this padded central yoke that practically hugs your neck and shoulders, handles that stick straight out in front of you, and these cambered ends that actually drop the weight slightly anterior and inferior, so forward and down compared to the main shaft. It literally forces you into a completely different posture. Which brings us to a really crucial question for your programming. Think about it. If you load up, say, 300 pounds on the standard straight bar, and then you load up that exact same 300 pounds on the safety squat bar, does changing the physical bar actually change the physical results you're getting from the exact same absolute weight? I mean, are you building the same strength? Is your body working just as hard? Section 1. Beyond the standard barbell. So why do we even use this thing in the first place? According to the researchers, lifters typically use the SSB for three main reasons. First, because of those front handles, it lets you squat heavy while totally avoiding shoulder or elbow issues. You just don't have to crank your arms back to grip the bar. Second, it's great for accommodating limited hip, ankle, or torso flexibility. And third, it just provides some much-needed variation in your long-term programming. But because of these weird mechanical differences, there's always been this gym myth about whether the SSB is somehow easier or if it builds the exact same strength as the classic straight bar. Section 2. Inside the squat lab. To figure out what's really going on under the bar, researchers grabbed 12 recreationally trained men, guys who've been lifting consistently for about 1 to 5 years, and put them through this beautifully designed crossover study. In session 1, everybody established a 1-rep max with the traditional Olympic bar. Then, they did 2 randomized workout sessions spaced a few days apart. One session, 3 sets of 6 reps with the Olympic bar. The other session, the exact same rep scheme, but with the SSB. So every single lifter acted as their own control group, letting researchers compare exactly how the 2 bars affected the exact same human body. Now, this number is the absolute key to the whole thing. 80. The lifters used exactly 80% of their Olympic 1-rep max for both bars during their sets of 6. I want to really emphasize that. They did not lower the weight for the SSB. If their 80% load was 250 pounds, they squatted 250 on the Olympic bar on Tuesday and 250 on the SSB on Thursday. This absolute loading strategy is what makes this study so incredibly revealing. Section 3. Force, speed, and effort. To measure the real impact of this heavy loading, they didn't just ask the guys how they felt after a set. They brought out the heavy machinery. First, peak force was measured with a Bertec force plate to calculate the maximum ground reaction force in newtons. Second, average concentric velocity, basically how fast the bar was moving on the way back up, was tracked by a Tendo linear position transducer, tethered right to the barbell. And finally, the rating of perceived exertion, which is how hard the lifter actually felt they were working. Just a quick refresher on that gym jargon for anyone who doesn't use it every day. RPE just means how hard the lift felt on a 0 to 10 scale. A 0 is basically sitting on the couch watching TV, and a 10 means you literally couldn't grind out another rep if your life depended on it. The researchers were super careful to anchor these numbers during the warm-up sessions, so everyone was rating their effort on the exact same mental scale. Okay, look at this force plate data. See how perfectly even the white bars, which are the Olympic barbell, and the gray bars for the SSB actually are? The peak force output was completely identical whether they used the standard bar or the SSB. Across all 3 sets, the lifters were driving the exact same amount of force into the ground, averaging right around 2,400 to 2,600 newtons. The physical, absolute strength required from the lower body to move that load was virtually indistinguishable. And the psychological side, exactly the same story. The white and gray bars here are nearly level again. The RPE naturally climbed from set 1 to set 3 as they got tired, but it climbed identically for both bars, hitting right around an 8 out of 10 by the end. Pushing that weight felt just as brutally hard on their muscles and their nervous system, regardless of which bar was sitting on their shoulders. Section 4. The velocity difference. So if the SSB produces the exact same peak force and it feels exactly as hard to lift, they must be doing the exact same thing to the body, right? Well, actually, no. This is where the science gets really, really fascinating. Check out the clear, statistically significant drop in average concentric velocity when they used the SSB. The gray bars are noticeably lower. On average, the Olympic bar moved at about 0.42 meters per second, while the SSB was dragging behind at just 0.38 meters per second. It's a total biomechanical paradox. Even though the weight was exactly the same, even though it took the exact same ground force to move it, and even though the lifter's brain felt it was just as heavy, the bar itself actually moved significantly slower with the SSB. It turns out the mechanics of that cambered bar inherently change your leverage, making it genuinely harder to generate speed. The researchers hit the nail on the head here. They pointed out that to achieve the exact same speed on an SSB, you actually have to lower the absolute weight so it matches the SSB's specific 1-rep max. Because it puts you at a slight mechanical disadvantage, usually resulting in an 11 to 12% lower 1-rep max than a straight bar, 80% of your Olympic max is effectively a much heavier relative weight when you apply it to the SSB. That's exactly why it grinds upwards so much slower. Section 5. Upgrading your leg day. So, how do we actually use this data in the gym? Well, these takeaways are super practical. First off, if your goal is pure strength, you can use these bars completely interchangeably. They generate identical peak force and trigger the same perceived effort. If your shoulders are banged up, swap in the SSB and you can rest easy knowing you aren't losing out on any strength gains. But, and this is a big but, if you're doing velocity-based training for athletic power and speed, you absolutely must lower the load on the SSB to hit your target speeds. You can't just copy and paste your Olympic numbers over. So, knowing all this, knowing that the SSP forces the exact same absolute weight to move slower and makes you adapt your mechanics to grind through a tougher leverage point, how are you going to program your next leg day? Are you sticking to the standard straight bar? Or are you ready to challenge your nervous system with the SSB? Something to think about before your next trip to the rack. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer and keep pushing those numbers.